At 0813 local time, the surface search consoles aboard USS Gerald R. Ford pick up 5 new returns at the far edge of the radar picture. No AIS, no navigation lights, 5 low-profile contacts holding steady speed and closing from the southwest. The Caribbean is calm, visibility limitless, the kind of morning bridge crews dream about. No one raises their voice. Log every track. Condition 3. Steel hums softly as the watch team locks in. The carrier does not alter course. She has no reason to. On the tactical display, the contacts spread apart, then slide back into alignment. A shallow arc begins to form, each hull taking its place with clear intent. Speed climbs from 18 knots to 22. Bearings tighten. The geometry looks too clean to be accidental. This is not drift. This is approach. Deep below, in Combat Information Center, the contacts are given numbers instead of names. Sierra 1 through Sierra 5. As radar and optics line up, the profiles sharpen into Venezuelan Navy vessels. Mixed surface combatants, older hulls, light displacement, but moving in coordination. Their course changes are slight, almost invisible unless someone is studying every detail. Tiny corrections. Quiet precision. The carrier holds steady. No alarms, no drama. A bridge-to-bridge hail goes out, professional and measured, first in English, then in Spanish. The answer is static. The silence is entered into the log. On the flight deck, operations pause mid-cycle. An elevator stops between decks. Yellow shirts freeze with their hands still on chains. Nothing looks chaotic. Everything looks controlled. That is the point of a carrier. It does not flinch. At 0817, the closest point of approach drops below 8 nautical miles. That number matters. The Surface Warfare Coordinator states it without emotion, CPA trending down. The officer of the deck gives a single nod. The ship's 5-inch mount shifts a few degrees, barely noticeable to the eye, impossible to miss through optics. Not a lock. Not a threat, a clear signal that the mount is awake. The Venezuelan formation tightens again. Sierra 3 edges ahead, gaining 2 knots over the others. Its bow throws a cleaner wake as it angles to cross ahead of the carrier's projected track. On a civilian vessel, that kind of move would force a reaction. The carrier gives none. Another hail goes out. Same words, same calm tone, same silence in return. At 0820, the first helicopter crew mans up. The MH-60R sits cold on deck, rotors still. No launch order yet. Presence is not a switch, it is a dial, and the ship keeps it low. Below decks, electronic support teams begin recording emissions. Nothing overt. Service search radars, routine surface sets. Just enough to confirm the other side is watching too. Every ping is time-stamped. 5 tracks, 5 intentions, 1 outcome still unknown. The CPA keeps shrinking, 6 miles. Now the Venezuelan arc looks less like an intercept and more like a loose cordon. It is a shape meant to be seen. The carrier's wake runs straight through the middle of it all, an unbroken white line that refuses to bend. At 0823, Sierra 3 changes course again, sharper this time. Its bow swings left, aiming to cut across the carrier's path with less than 5 miles to spare. On the bridge, a junior watchstander glances toward the captain. The captain never raises his voice. Maintain course. Record everything. The order travels through the ship like current through wire. The flight deck stays paused. The gun mount holds its angle. The helicopter remains chained. The message is simple. Restraint documented in full. Another hail finally comes back. Short, accented, non-committal. A statement of presence. A suggestion of sovereign activity. No mention of distance. No acknowledgement of safety. It is logged, translated, filed, and left without comment. At 0826, the CPA bottoms out at 4.8 nautical miles. Close enough to matter. Close enough to be misunderstood. Close enough for steel to become headlines. The carrier does not turn. Sierra 3 eases off its rudder. Speed drops by a knot, then another. The arc starts to loosen. One by one, the Venezuelan ships widen their spacing. No announcement, no apology, just geometry relaxing back into open water. On radar, the pressure curve flattens. The helicopter crew remains ready. The elevator remains stopped. The carrier holds her line. No rounds fired, no warnings escalated. By 0830, the contacts are still there, still pacing in parallel, still watching, but no longer closing. The log captures the final bearings with exact timestamps. The first minutes are over, but the situation is not. Out here, the distance between pressure and collision is measured in headings and seconds. And for the moment, only one ship has refused to blink. At 0834 local time, the picture stabilizes without truly resolving. The 5 Venezuelan hulls remain on parallel tracks off the carrier's port quarter. Distance holds just beyond 5 nautical miles, close enough to make out detail, far enough to deny intent. This is the gray space where mistakes are born. From the bridge, the sea still looks empty. Blue all the way to the horizon. That is how confrontations at sea often appear. Nothing visible, everything happening. The Surface Warfare Coordinator notes a new pattern. Sierra 2 and Sierra 4 adjust speed in opposite directions, stretching the formation without advancing or retreating. It feels like a probe, the kind designed to see whether the other side twitches. The carrier does not. Speed remains constant. Heading unchanged. The wake stays straight. Below, sensor fusion sharpens the picture. Radar, electro-optical, and ESM overlays align. Hull numbers appear only in flashes through heat shimmer. The Venezuelan ships are running light. No topside activity suggests immediate weapons preparation. That matters, but it relaxes no one. Another hail goes out. Same wording, same even cadence. The reply comes back broken and half-heard. No commitment to distance, no acknowledgement of safety. The exchange is logged and time-stamped. At 0839, the carrier's 5-inch mount slews a few degrees again, subtly mirroring Sierra 2's bow shift. Still no lock, still no targeting radar. It is a language with no sound, and those who understand it do not mistake its meaning. On the flight deck, the pause stretches long enough to become noticeable. The stopped elevator now draws the eye. Sailors remain exactly where they were when the cycle froze. No one looks shaken. This is what discipline looks like when cameras might be everywhere and none of them matter. A quiet recommendation moves through the chain. Prepare aviation presence. The MH-60R crew straps in. Rotor blades stay still. The aircraft is not a threat. It is an option, and the option remains sheathed. At 0842, Sierra 1 makes a slow inward turn, shaving off distance by a few cables. The CPA calculator flickers amber, then green, then amber again as the track settles. The move is small. The meaning is not. The carrier answers with nothing. What changes instead is documentation. Long-range cameras track continuously. Every bearing change is recorded. Every radio call is captured. The mission is no longer to influence behavior. It is to preserve the truth of it. At 0846, the Venezuelan formation stages a visual display. Deck crews appear topside. Flags can be seen. No weapons are manned. It is theater without bite, but it still goes into the log. The officer of the deck asks CIC for confirmation. No fire control illumination? The response comes immediately. Negative. Service search only. The line has not been crossed. Everyone notices how near it came. The carrier's course stays ruler straight across the chart. At 0849, a subtle shift appears. Sierra 3 drops back by half a mile. Not enough to signal withdrawal, but enough to break the symmetry. The arc that once suggested a cordon now looks uneven, less certain. The helicopter stays chained. That choice is deliberate. Launching now would raise the level of presence at the exact moment restraint is doing the heavier work. Another hail comes in, this one clearer. It references proximity to Venezuelan waters without claiming control. It asks, rather than orders, for a course change. The bridge replies once, formally, stating international transit and the intention to maintain course. No extra words, no added warning. Then silence again. By 0853, the CPA trend line flattens. The amber flicker disappears. Sierra 2 and Sierra 4 widen their spacing. Sierra 1 steadies. The formation exhales. The carrier does not celebrate. There is nothing to celebrate. Pressure is not victory. It is only pressure. The flight deck is released in stages. The elevator lowers. Chains come off. Operations resume with no commentary at all. To anyone watching from the outside, it would look as if nothing happened. That is exactly the point. At 0856, all 5 Venezuelan ships remain on parallel headings, still present, still visible, but no longer shaping the carrier's future track. The log captures the geometry as it is, not as anyone might wish it to be. Out here, escalation is not always measured by what is used. Sometimes it is measured by what is withheld. The carrier withholds a great deal. The standoff does not end. It settles. And in that settling, it reveals one of the quiet rules of the sea. When one side refuses to perform, the other eventually runs out of lines. At 0901 local time, the geometry tightens once more. Sierra 3 slips out of the uneven line and angles back in. The turn is shallow, almost polite, but the math behind it is not. Speed increases by 2 knots. The bearing drifts toward the carrier's projected track. CPA recalculates and drops quickly. The Surface Warfare Coordinator says it flatly. CPA trending 3.6. No one shows a reaction. Inside the ship, procedures shift. The helicopter launch order is given quietly. Not an alarm, not a declaration. Just a sentence spoken once on the flight deck. Rotor blades begin to turn. The sound spreads across the steel in a low, steady thrum. Sailors step back into motion with the same discipline they showed when everything paused. There is no rush, Rushing gives things away. At 0903, the aircraft lifts cleanly, low and smooth, nose forward, climbing only enough to clear the island. It does not point at anything. It takes up a wide orbit that says awareness, not challenge. Cameras switch on, sensors sharpen. Below deck, the data stream thickens as optical zoom picks out bridge windows and infrared catches engine exhaust and movement across the decks. On Sierra 3, several crew members gather near the forward section of the ship. They are not standing at a weapon, but they are close enough to draw attention. The carrier stays on course. Another hail goes out from the helicopter, short and precise. Distance, safety, international waters, English first, then Spanish. This time the response comes back immediately. It acknowledges the call without giving anything away. The words are careful. The pause between them says more than the words themselves. At 0906, the CPA falls below 3 nautical miles. That number matters more than any statement on the radio. At this distance, hydrodynamics and human judgment start competing with each other. Wake interaction becomes real. A small mistake stops being theoretical. The helicopter tightens its orbit, not closer, just more deliberate. The camera stays steady. The laser remains off. Presence is enough. Sierra 3 keeps closing, then hesitates. Its bow wavers by a degree. Speed slips just a fraction. The change is small, but the sensors catch it. The carrier's 5-inch mount answers with another subtle adjustment, only a few degrees, echoing that hesitation. Still no lock, still no fire control radar, just a mirror held up in silence. At 0908, the Venezuelan formation responds late. Sierra 1 and Sierra 5 begin easing outward, widening the spread. The arc breaks. Sierra 3 is no longer supported the way it was before. Alone, it looks less certain. The helicopter repeats its hail unchanged. Same wording, same tone. That consistency is the point. At 0910, Sierra 3 drops another knot. Its bow shifts right, slightly but unmistakably. CPA climbs back above 3 miles. The amber warning clears. No one celebrates. The aircraft keeps its orbit for 2 more minutes, recording everything. The carrier continues straight ahead, its wake still an unbroken line. Nothing is said loudly. The message is delivered by example. At 0913, a new transmission comes in from the Venezuelan side. This one speaks of coordination and safety. It avoids ownership. It avoids apology. It asks for mutual awareness. The bridge replies once, formally acknowledging the transmission and restating course and speed. Nothing more. The helicopter widens its orbit and climbs slightly, keeping every hull in frame. The laser stays off. That choice is deliberate. Light would raise the temperature. Recording does not. By 0916, the formation stabilizes again on parallel tracks. Distance opens to 4 nautical miles. The immediate risk eases, but it does not disappear. Encounters like this do not end cleanly. They taper off. The aircraft remains overhead for one more circuit, then receives the call to return. It peels away in a gentle arc, crossing no bow, forcing no reaction. The deck crew recovers it without ceremony. Operations resume, not all at once, but carefully. At 0921, the CPA holds steady above 5 miles. The Venezuelan hulls are still there, still visible, but their headings no longer shape the carrier's future path. The data now confirms what the eye can already see. The sharp edge has passed. Out here, the difference between collision and control is not courage. It is patience applied at the right altitude and the right distance. Today, that margin held. The sea goes back to looking empty. The log does not. At 0927 local time, the encounter changes character. Not suddenly, not dramatically. It changes the way pressure usually breaks at sea, quietly and in pieces too small for headlines. The Venezuelan formation begins to open up. Sierra 2 widens to starboard by half a mile. Sierra 4 mirrors the move to port. The symmetry that once hinted at containment dissolves into simple parallel motion. No ship turns away outright. None has to. On the carrier's bridge, the update is delivered in an even tone. Spacing increasing, CPA stable. The words land and move on. There is nothing to add beyond their accuracy. The ship maintains course and speed. The wake remains straight. The absence of maneuver becomes a maneuver of its own. Below decks, watch teams stay at their stations. No posture relaxes. Sensors keep recording. This is the phase where complacency creates incidents and discipline prevents them. At 0931 Sierra 3, the ship that pressed closest slides back into line. Speed equalizes with the others. The bow angle settles. The math behind the track no longer suggests intersection. The risk curve flattens. The helicopter remains secured on deck. No relaunch, no flyover. That choice is intentional. Presence has already been applied. Repeating it now would suggest uncertainty. A final hail comes in from the Venezuelan side. This one is procedural. Navigation safety. Confirmation of mutual awareness. No demands, no challenge. The bridge replies once formally and logs the exchange. There will be no more conversation. The formation continues on its parallel course, now clearly satisfied with being seen rather than shaping events. Distance stretches to 6 nautical miles, then 7. On the flight deck, the pause ends completely. Aircraft are repositioned. The elevator cycles. Operations return to full rhythm. To an untrained eye, it looks like routine naval life reclaiming the deck. That is no accident. At 0938, the carrier's gun mount returns to neutral train. The movement is small and unannounced. Those watching closely notice. Those who are not, do not need to. The tactical picture simplifies. 5 tracks. Constant speed, no converging vectors. Whatever leverage the standoff had is now gone. No one declares an outcome. There is no signal to mark the moment. In naval encounters, the side that needs a declaration often gives away control of the story. The carrier continues its transit beneath an unchanged horizon. The Venezuelan ships remain in sight, but now as observers rather than variables. The distinction is subtle. It is also decisive. At 0944, the range opens beyond 10 nautical miles. At that distance, the geometry stops arguing. The sea returns to being space instead of pressure. Inside the ship, logs are reviewed in real time. Bearings, speeds, audio, video. Every detail is preserved exactly as it happened. Not for show, for record. This is where restraint proves its value. No escalation required, no correction imposed. Once one side stops feeding the pressure, the environment itself absorbs it. The carrier does not alter course to acknowledge the change. It never did. By 0950, the Venezuelan hulls begin to drift aft on the radar picture. Their relative motion is now unmistakable, still present, still tracking, but no longer shaping anything that matters. The bridge notes the trend, the watch rotates, lunch preparation begins below decks. The ship does not celebrate, it simply moves on. Out here, the turning point is rarely the loudest moment. It is usually the instant when one side's options begin to narrow while the other side's widen, and no one says a word. That instant has already passed. Steel returns to routine, distance becomes margin again. The encounter resolves the way most professional naval confrontations do, without witnesses ever knowing the exact second it ended. At 11:02 local time, the tactical picture settles into routine. 5 Venezuelan surface contacts remain on the screen, now well aft of the carrier's beam. Distance continues to open. Bearings drift slowly and predictably. The geometry no longer argues. On the bridge, the officer of the deck makes a final notation. Time, range, relative motion. No adjectives, no conclusions. The log does not care how anyone feels about what happened. It only preserves what did. Below decks, sensors continue recording for another hour. Not because there is still danger, but because discipline does not switch itself off the moment pressure fades. Professional navies assume nothing until the sea proves it. The flight deck is fully alive again. Launch cycles resume. Arresting gear checks pass without comment. The elevator runs smoothly as if it had never paused. From the outside, the ship looks exactly as it did before 5 warships moved in. That continuity is not accidental. It is the result. In Combat Information Center, analysts begin stitching the event together while it is still fresh. Radar plots line up with optical feeds. Radio calls sync to timestamps. Speed changes are graphed. Course changes are overlaid. The result is not a story, it is a record, and the record is clear. No weapons were trained, no fire control radars illuminated, no warning shots were fired, no course deviation was forced. It also shows something else just as clearly. Intent was expressed, then abandoned. The Venezuelan ships approached in coordinated geometry. They tested spacing. They shaped angles meant to prompt a response. When that response never came, the geometry unraveled on its own. That is not interpretation, that is math. By 1021, the range exceeds 15 nautical miles. At that distance, wakes no longer interact. Decision-making regains margin. The sea becomes wide again. On the bridge, the captain reviews the final plot once. He does not linger over it. There is nothing left to influence. The ship's mission continues forward, not backward. This is the part that rarely makes compelling footage. No victory pose, no radio declaration, no visible shift in posture to mark success. In naval operations, the absence of escalation is not passive. It is restraint applied continuously until the other side runs out of leverage. The crew understands that because they are trained to. At 1034, the Venezuelan formation begins to peel away completely. Each hull eases onto its own heading. Not together, not dramatically, just separate vectors pointing elsewhere. The radar picture confirms what the eye already knows. The encounter is over, not because anyone announced it, but because no one needs to. The logs are finalized. The recordings are secured. The ship does not rush to broadcast them. They will speak later if they ever have to. Evidence does not need urgency. Out here, the most decisive actions often leave the fewest visible marks. 5 warships closed in, 1 ship held course. No steel touch steel. The lesson does not need bold lettering. Power at sea is not measured by how loudly it announces itself, but by how little it needs to move when tested. The carrier did not maneuver to prove anything. In a sense, it maneuvered by refusing to. As the horizon clears and the tracks fade into irrelevance, the ship returns fully to routine. Watches rotate. Coffee is refilled. Maintenance checks resume. The ocean does what it always does. It stretches out and absorbs the moment. For those who were watching closely, the message is already complete. When pressure meets discipline, pressure is the first thing to fade. No shots fired, no public statements, just a straight wake, log bearings, and a transit completed exactly as planned.